is the Nishayanda, and from the Nishayanda these rises the Nirmanakaya. This is or these are the fundamental Buddha, and the rest are all transformed manifestations. The first part of the Way translation is unintelligible, while the latter part fully coincides with the Ang. The unintelligible part reads, 6. The Vipaka Buddha. The nature of a Vipaka Buddha is that of a Nishayanda Buddha when this is understood in the sense of a result flowing from an antecedent cause. That is, as one of the 5 effects, and not in the sense of something secondary which issues out of a more primary substance. And the idea is closely connected with the theory of karma. This is not difficult to see, for the theory of karma always requires something resulting from a cause. That is, according to it, no act can perish without leaving its effect in one way or another. The theory of karma is another name for the law of causation. A deed, whether moral or psychological, therefore, once committed in the inner consciousness, or by the physical body, will never fail to bring, not only on the doer or thinker himself, but upon those intimately related to him some result someday, whose value will somehow correspond with the antecedent. Buddhism, thus, has developed an elaborate science treating of the law of causation in the moral world. This was the case especially with the earlier followers of the Buddha before the Mahayana began to develop to its full strength. The Jataka tales are compiled wholly with the view of acquainting us with practical narratives illustrating the theory of karma. One of the forms in which the theory of karma has impressed its marks in Mahayana Buddhism is the conception of the Vipaka, or the Nishayanda Buddha. The result of the moral discipline known as the 6 or 10 perfections which every aspirant for Buddhahood is required to observe, must be visible in some way on the being of the Bodhisattva. And as long as a world of individual forms is to be accepted even as an inevitable outcome of discrimination, the result of the Buddhist devotion must be told, also, under this limitation. Then the Bodhisattva ascends to Akanishtha heaven where his coarser body is transformed into a shining one with all the marks of an ideally perfect personality. He is then no more a Bodhisattva endowed with the coarse physical corporeality like ourselves, but an immortal God or Buddha endowed with a will-made body to which the Lankavatara makes frequent allusions. There is, however, another conception here entering into the makeup of a shining Buddha, which comes from our inmost religious yearnings. By this I mean the deep human longing for a body of transfiguration. We are not satisfied with our corporeal existence. We are all the time oppressed by the feeling of imprisonment. Our spirit soars away from this world of physical limitations. We long forever for a Manamayakaya. This physical body does not fully express the meaning of the spirit. It deranges, it tyrannizes. In fact, all the religious struggles and aspirations we experience in this life are centered on the control of this body. Theosophists, Swedenborgians, and the Taoists, and the Indian philosophers, they all have the idea of an immaterial body which we can assume when we are favored by a divine gift, or when our moral discipline reaches its culmination. This is in one sense our longing for immortality. We immortalize all the great historical characters, for we cannot be reconciled to the idea that their physical ending means the end of all that has entered into their being. The Buddha's entrance into nirvana by no means indicated the passing of all that belonged to him. His disciples could never make themselves believe that their master was no more with them. The dogma of the Dharmakaya was the inevitable outcome of their psychology as well as of their logic. But the Dharmakaya was still too abstract and could not give full satisfaction to their deep-seated religious longings. These longings so innate to the human heart were combined in the case of the Buddhist with the doctrine of karma. And as the result the Vipaka or the Nishayanda Buddha, or Pao Shen, came into existence in his ideal glorification. Amitabha Buddha, the Lord of Infinite Light, who is one of these Pao Shen Buddhas, sits now securely in his land of bliss and purity, surrounded by his worshippers and inviting us poor earthly struggling mortals to join him there. Between the Vipaka Buddha and the Nirmana Buddha, it will take some more research to ascertain the historic priority of the one or the other. Whatever we may say about the self-enjoyment of the Bodhisattva or Buddha, he could not be a Buddha if he would not manifest himself in every possible form for the spiritual benefit of all beings. His original vow was to save his fellow beings when he attained enlightenment. Now that he has achieved that end, how can he stay quietly in a Kanistha heaven, absorbed in a samadhi of the highest order and enwrapped in the glow of supernatural nature? Even if he does not leave his lotus mansion, he ought to dispatch, at least, one of his transformation bodies wherever and whenever that is desired by sentient Bape. Gs. Or, to state the case in terms of suffering souls, they must be able to approach the Buddha in some way. If the Buddha himself is so transcendental and detached from a world of individual objects, suffering souls must be allowed to come into intimate relationship with his shadow or transformation body, transformed for the sake of unregenerate mortals. This is why Avalokitesvara has his 33 bodies, and why Shatagava his innumerable representations. Thus, the existence of the Nirmfuna Buddha can be understood in two ways. One from the standpoint of the Buddha himself, whose loving heart cannot help resorting to every possible means of salvation, and the other from the standpoint of sinful mortals who desire every possible help from a power higher than themselves. This mutuality has filled the world with Nirmita Nair Mavaka Buddhas. Wherever we turn we come across one of these transformations, and if we are earnest and sincere and longing from the depths of the heart, we can see even the real Buddha himself in and through them. This is an idea pregnant with results both good and bad. When it is not judiciously handled, religion becomes a mass of superstition and idolatry grows rampant. The relation of the three Buddhas to one another may be understood in the analogy of an individual person. That there is something ultimate making up the reason of this individual existence is to be granted. Because the very conception of individuality is impossible without postulating something behind it. This something is variously designated in philosophy and religion, and also variously interpreted and speculated on. Even the denying of the existence of this something is in truth asserting it, for both denial and assertion are based on the same principle. We cannot escape this, and what makes it thus inevitable for us either to assert or deny it is the principle of individuality. This corresponds to the conception of the Dharmata, or when personified, to the Dhammata Buddha. Now this individual person stands in every possible manner of relationship to his fellow beings, human or otherwise. As Zhuangzi says, a woman may be regarded by her companions as the most beautiful person and as such admired and adored and loved. But when she comes near a pond and reflects her shadow on water, all the aquatic inhabitants will flee away from her as a most dangerous enemy. What is one man's poison is another's elixir of life. The same individual is not the same at all times to all others. Even a table standing in this room does not look alike to all spectators. As it is observed from different angles and with different frames of mind, the object before them is not only physically not of the same size and color, but psychologically not at all of the same value and significance. In the case of a living person, this variability, temporal and constant, reaches its limits. The person himself has not apparently changed, but assumes or seems to assume different forms to his neighbors. May not this aspect of his being be called his nirmana value? In spite of all these external and relational mutations, the individual has not at all changed to his own consciousness. That be is himself he at all times knows, and he enjoys his personality. This corresponds to the Vipaka Buddha, or Sambhogakaya. Every conscious being may thus figuratively or rather metaphysically be said to be the owner of the trippy body. In the case of the Buddha, the doctrine is filled with religious significance, and it has played a most important role in the development of Mahayana Buddhism. One thing we have to notice here is the replacing of the Buddha Trinity by that of the body. that Buddhist philosophers have come to talk of the Trikaya instead of Buddhatraya. It is not a matter of mere change of terminology, it involves a deeper meaning. The reason is that Kaya Bas are more synthesizing value, while Buddha suggests more of individuality. The three different kinds of Buddhahood make one think of three different, separate individuals, but the Trikaya means one personality with three aspects. In the conception of the triple body we trace a systematizing thought. The Lankavatara, therefore, marks a step toward this systematization. The triple body in the Awakening of Faith in the Mahayana. With the author of the Awakening of Faith in the Mahayana, the theory of the triple body assumes a more finished form. The following deals with the subject. And again by the functions of suchness is meant that all the Buddha Tathagatas while they were still on the stage of self-discipline awakened great love and compassion, practiced all the virtues of perfection, and embraced all beings making great vows, in which they expressed the desire to emancipate the entire world of beings without distinction and exception. Nor have they set any limit to the number of ages, for their vows reach the furthest end of time. They regard all beings as if the latter were themselves. Yet they do not assume the form of a particular being. Why is this so? Because they really know that all beings and themselves are of suchness. That they both are of the same nature, without any distinguishing marks. As they have such great upajnana, dispelling ignorance, they see the Dharmakaya in its original essence, and without being conscious of it, perform wonderful deeds, a variety of activities. They are indeed like suchness itself manifesting themselves all over the universe, and yet they leave no marks whereby their activities can be traced. Why? Because the substance of all the Buddha Tathagatas is no other than the Dharmakaya in its pure form of intelligence. There are no parts in absolute truth that correspond to worldly truths, it has nothing to do with the constraints of achievement. It, nevertheless, benefits all beings, as they catch glimpses of it through their senses, and thus we speak of its functionings. Of these functionings we distinguish two kinds. What are they? The one is dependent on the individualizing mind and is perceived by the minds of the two vehicle followers. It is known as responding body. As they do not know that this is projected by their evolving mind. They take it for something external to themselves, and making it assume a corporeal form, fail to have a thorough knowledge of its nature. The second one is dependent on the karma consciousness. That is, it appears to the minds of those bodhisattvas who have just entered upon the path of bodhisattvahood as well as of those who have reached the highest stage. This is known as the recompense body. The body is visible in infinite forms. Each form has infinite marks, and each mark is excellent in infinite ways, and the world in which the body has its abode is also embellished in manners infinitely varying. As the body is manifested everywhere, it has no limitations whatever, it can never be exhausted, it goes beyond all the conditions of determination. According to the needs of all beings it becomes visible and is always held by them, it is neither destroyed nor lost sight of. All such characteristics of the body are the perfuming effect of the immaculate deeds such as the virtues of perfection and also the work of the mysterious perfuming innate in the Tathagata Gava. As it is thus in possession of immeasurably blissful qualities, it is called recompense body. Those which are visible to ordinary mortals are of coarser corporeality, appearing differently according to which one of the 6 paths of existence a man lives in. These different forms conceived by different beings are not of blissful character. Therefore, they are known as the responding body. And again, as the bodhisattva who has first entered upon the path of bodhisattvaship has a firm faith in the truth of suchness, he is granted to have a partial glimpse of the recompense body. He knows that the forms, characteristic marks, embellishments, etc., belong to the recompense body, are in their nature neither coming nor going, are beyond the categories of determination, that they are only visible depending upon the mind and not detached from suchness. But in the mind of this bodhisattva there is still individualization, as he has not yet entered upon the rank of Dharmakaya. When, however, his heart is thoroughly purified, he can see things of finer quality, and his activity will be more excellent than ever. At the culminating stage of Bodhisattvahood, his vision reaches its height. And when the karma consciousness is no more, there is nothing for him to see. For the Dharmakaya of all the Buddhas has no forms, no marks whatever, of which there is any possibility of mutual perception. If the Dharmakaya of all the Buddhas has nothing to do with forms and marks, how is it possible for it to manifest itself in forms and marks? Because the Dharmakaya is the substance of all forms, it manifests itself in forms. From the very beginning, indeed, mind and form are not two, the essence of form is knowledge. Because the substance of form is not material, it is known as the knowledge body. And because the essence of knowledge is form, it is known as the Dharmakaya, which is omnipresent and whose visible forms have no limiting conditions. They appear according to the mind. In the 10 quarters of the world there are innumerable bodhisattvas, innumerable bodies of recompense, innumerable embellishments. They are all distinct one from another, and yet they are not subject to limiting conditions, nor are they mutually exclusive. This is beyond the discrimination of a discerning mind, for it is due to the absolute activity of suchness. 4. The Tathagata. The Lankavatara Sutra being one of the principal Mahayana texts treating of the inner truth realized by the Tathagata. Pratyatma Vedya Gati Dham Mh Tathagatanam. It behoves us to have some knowledge of the Tathagata himself, as far as it is given us in the sutra. In fact, we already know something of him when we have investigated what this inner truth is, for it constitutes the very essence of Tathagatahood, who would not be himself if he had it not. Not only that, his whole life is regarded as to be given up to the propagation of Pratyatmadharma. The identification of the Tathagata with Pratyatmadharma does not require any specific proofs, as this, indeed, composes the contents of the Lankavatara itself. But the Pratyatmadharma alone of itself does not make up the whole being of the Tathagata, who requires something more to move among the ignorant and conference used. And who desires to lead all beings up to the same elevation where he himself is. The realm where he moves along with his inner revelations is, indeed, beyond that of the philosophers and the Sravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. As we are repeatedly reminded in the Lankavatara, but this self-enjoyment of the blissful samadhi is not what we expect of the Tathagata. He must show something more, he must be more than himself, go beyond his inner revelations. This means that he must be a personality. As was elsewhere noted, a great compassionate heart is to be awakened in the wise men who have seen yathabhutam into the inner truth of things, for this is what makes all great souls really living. To be a person means, among other things, to be a living being. To have a feeling heart, to live among the ignorant and confused, and not to remain isolated in his own intellectual transcendentalism. So all the Tathagatas of the past, present, and